Well, with Epic Universe opening in 2025, there's been a lot of focus on that new park opening, of course. But one of the things that I've pointed to, and many people have pointed to, is that the belief that Universal will go into the existing parks, given Universal Studios Florida and Islands of Adventure, and be adding new attractions and new things into those parks, because especially after Epic Universe opens, those parks do need some TLC in certain areas, and I do believe they need to up some of the offerings there to kind of be on par with what they're going to be offering at Epic Universe. Well, in the spirit of that, and some of the rumors out there, which we've discussed, that perhaps Pokemon taking over the Simpsons area and Zelda going in perhaps over to Islands of Adventure. We have a video here from the Great American Coasters channel where they basically talk about Universal Studios either removing or keeping the Simpsons area, and I figured let's watch through this video and get some thoughts on it, because a lot of people sent it over to me and they thought it had some pretty good points, so we're going to check it out. So that's what we're going to do here. So hi, I'm Jared with Capture the Magic, and we will just get right into this.
When you think of a ride that will be removed from Universal in the next, I want to say 10 years, what immediately comes to mind? Personally, for me, I picture rides like Hollywood Rip Ride Rocket and Fast and Furious Supercharged being removed as soon as possible once Universal gets the chance, because one of those rides is just average and the other one is just an embarrassment to the new Universal standard. And I think it's in the park's best interest to dismantle and demolish these rides to make...
He's not wrong in that Fast and Furious is basically universally just hated. Even Universal themselves admits this. One of the times my wife and I were stopped for a survey, and they asked us the question and said, like, what ride or attraction do you think basically like is the worst one or should get rid of in the parks? And as we went to answer, we didn't even utter the word yet. He goes, besides Fast and Furious Supercharged. And we were like, okay. So they're very aware of how people feel about that ride. So he's completely not wrong there.
Make room for future expansion. Those are clear-cut examples. Attractions I know Universal will be getting rid of soon. However, there are other rides at Universal that are a little more ambiguous with their expiration dates. As in, there are some rides or lands that we don't have a clear idea of when Universal will be getting rid of them. And there's no better example than the Simpsons Land. The Simpsons Land and the Simpsons Ride has been a property at Universal that has existed since 2008, so it's only 16 years of age.
I will say, although it's been 16 years old, my wife still holds a very intense grudge against this land because she is a massive Back to the Future fan, and ever since they took out that ride, she essentially, when walking through Simpsons Land, almost like for her going through a graveyard and like almost holds her breath. She rode the redone Back to the Future ride that is now the Simpsons ride in there one time, hated it, and essentially this is a part of the park that she will avoid at all costs. So for her, if this land were to go away, she would be one of the happiest people out there, because I think she somehow blames the Simpsons for this. Although she's not a big Simpsons fan either, nor am I myself, but I think she would be one of the happier people out there if this were to be a land that was gone.
But even though the land is not that old, there has still been a lot of speculation and rumors going around about the longevity of the area. Is it because the land is bad? Is it because people don't enjoy it anymore? Quite the contrary. Simpsons Land is probably one of the better areas at the original Universal Park. Really, the only land that's better at Universal Studios is, of course, Diagon Alley. But this is a fun...
I think the Simpsons Land, like, I'm not a Simpsons fan, really. I think the Simpsons Land is well-themed, and I'm trying to think if I disagree with him. I don't know if I disagree with him, because really Universal, this is, obviously the Wizarding Worlds are one of the first times they really did these very, I guess you could call them intense lands that are very well-themed and a lot of immersion and things. So while it's not on that same type of immersion as, say, Diagon Alley or Hogsmeade, it is a well-themed, well-done land that, it's got a lot of food options. It's got the one ride, the carnival aspect to it. So he might be right. I'm trying to think. I don't really think there's anything. I think I may actually agree with that after I sit there and think about it.
Fine number 2. When we look at the land itself, it's still popular. It still gets decently crowded. The ride always has a long line, usually about 30 minutes to an hour on...
I do think it's funny as this is being filmed, it says 10 minutes, but it typically will have 20 to 30 minute wait that I've seen.
Select days. And there's no section of the land that feels mediocre or underutilized. It perfectly displays what I expect a Simpsons Land would look like. So why would Universal get rid of this property if the land is still popular 2 decades after its debut? Well, I have a few reasons for why Universal would get rid of this land, but also a few reasons for why they would keep it. Again, the Simpsons Land is a very polarizing case. But let me first give you the reasons for why they would get rid of it. So the Simpsons, as you know, is not owned by Universal, and they have never owned The Simpsons in any way. Back in the 2000s, Universal, they did a deal with the creator of The Simpsons, Matt Groening, to get the creative rights of The Simpsons property, meaning they can license the property for one of their attractions. This is a practice that Universal is very familiar with. There are many different IPs that Universal has acquired over the years that they do not directly own. Think of movie franchises like Marvel, Transformers, and even Harry Potter. Yeah, that's right, Universal does not own Harry Potter. Warner Discovery does. Universal just owns the distribution rights for theme park projects. They have an exclusive deal where they can build lands and rides, but they're not involved in the movies or film production. And guess what? It's the exact same situation for The Simpsons. Universal, they have the theme park rights, but Disney, they own the production and series rights of The Simpsons.
This is, I don't know what else he's going to say after this, but Disney now owning The Simpsons is one of the main catalysts as to why, in my opinion, The Simpsons is not going to stay around for very long. Also, the contract for I believe, is up sometime in 2026. So the rumor is Universal is just going to end that contract early, not even try to renew it, because I think they look at just saying it's not yet again another property that their biggest competitor owns, and really the relevancy, in my opinion, of The Simpsons is not what it was years ago. And I think there are better properties that probably using either their own IPs or, again, the rumor being a Nintendo property of Pokemon that would go into this area. So I think that would be the main reason. I don't know what else he's going to say here, so I'll have to listen through. But I think that reason alone would probably override any other reasoning of why this is likely to go away.
The only issue Universal has with this agreement is that they're on borrowed time. When Universal made the deal with Matt Groening, they agreed that they would license The Simpsons for X amount of years before the contract expired, or if they wanted to renew it. We don't know when that time will be up. Some sources say it's between 20 to 25 years. So in the earliest possible time frame, Universal, they would have to give up the rights in 2028, or in the latest, 2033. So
okay, maybe it was 2028. I thought it was 2026, but maybe it is 2028 when the contract would potentially be up.
When that time eventually comes, Universal, they have to decide, do they want to renew the contract, or do they want to go with something else? The Simpsons, as we know, it's been going on for a long time. The show began in 1989, and it is long past its glory days. So would it even be worth it for Universal to renew the contract? Is The Simpsons still popular enough to where they want to keep the franchise? In a way, I can say yes and no. Yes, The Simpsons is not as popular as when it first started. It arguably hit its peak in the 90s and started to dwindle out in the late 2000s or early 2010s. However, even though The Simpsons, it is no longer at its peak, it is still a highly watched show. You may not know this, but The Simpsons is actually the most viewed program on Disney+, even if the later seasons of the show are borderline unwatchable.
I need to look. I don't know if that's true. Everything I've ever heard about the most watched thing on Disney Plus is Bluey. So I'll have to do some further research into this, as I looked real quick while recording this, and I can't find it for whatever reason of what this says. But everything I've ever heard about the most watched show on Disney Plus, if you look like the Nielsen top 10 and everything, is Bluey. I've never heard The Simpsons being the number one thing. He could be right. I just can't find anything on it, but I've always heard Bluey. But
the later seasons of the show are borderline unwatchable. The first 1 to 15 are still really good. People will watch the good seasons of the show over and over again because it's just great television. And not that The Simpsons is still a pop culture juggernaut. There are so many memes and references to the show that impact pop culture today that it's hard to realize that the show is over 35 years old, because a lot of the early seasons are just timeless and funny. Heck, one of my favorite parts of the Simpsons ride is just standing in the queue and watching Simpsons clips on the TV.
Now you be a good, Pinicio, and don't you lie.
I promise I will never hurt you.
Ouch!
The Simpsons, no matter what, will always be relevant, no matter how far the show is past its prime. So if relevancy isn't the reason why Universal would get rid of the Simpsons Land, then what is it? Well, I think one big factor for why Universal will remove The Simpsons is not because of relevancy, but because of the ride system. Universal, like I said many times before, they're up to a new standard of how they execute their attractions. It seems like they don't like doing simulators or 3D rides anymore, and I think it's for the best.
He's got a good point. And you know, that ride system, if you've ever ridden it lately, is very aged. Like, that ride feels old. It hasn't really stood the test of time as it's gone on. But I agree with him, probably what he's going to go into here, which is I think Universal's in this new phase of how they're doing rides and like the standards of which that, you know, people can expect out of their new rides. And I do agree with him. I think that that's probably one reason amongst others why they would probably completely redo this land.
Those aren't my favorite. They're kind of lazy. It's the thrilling equivalent of watching TV while someone shakes you in your chair. And when you look at recent attractions that Universal has done, like Hagrid's or every ride going to Epic Universe, you can tell they want to put more effort in live set pieces with multiple animatronics and moving parts. So when you look at current Universal compared to Universal of yesteryear, it's clear they've had a change in strategy for how they design new projects. So would it be a safe bet that they would want to get rid of a simulator to potentially make room for something else? I would think so, especially since the ride system itself is very outdated. Even though the Simpsons ride opened in 2008, the ride itself has been around since the early 90s. The Simpsons was just a reskin of the Back to the Future ride. All Universal really did was change the movie you were watching.
He's right. And you can, if you remember being on Back to the Future, you go on the Simpsons ride, you can see all of the old elements that were there. Like, essentially, he's right, just retheming it, a reskin of the same ride.
Everything else is pretty much the same. The only reason why I think the Simpsons ride is still around is because Universal, they're trying to get as much mileage as they can out of the ride before it hits the end of its service life. You have to understand that every attraction that Universal owns is an investment. They put a down payment on a ride, and then they pay it off over a period of time. But since this ride in particular has been operating for 30 plus years, Universal, they've already gotten their money's worth out of this ride, so now they're just waiting to see how much longer the attraction can go before it completely craps out.
I think more than likely, I mean, if you look at the timeline of them adding things to the existing parks, the last little bit here hasn't been much because they've been building Epic Universe. I think the reason that this land hasn't had either been replaced or something else done with it or other areas of, Universal Studios is just simply because of all the money and investment and effort going into Epic Universe, which is why I keep saying whenever that is completed, I think very quickly, I think a lot of people assume they're just going to kind of, let Epic open, chill out a little bit, let it make money, which they very well could. But I think sooner than people anticipate, they're going to circle back into Studio Side and Islands of Adventure and start adding more things into there because I think they feel the momentum that they have and the opportunity. And obviously you want to bring things up to the same level of Epic Universe as I think guests will come to expect a new level of, rides and immersion and things like that.
Or if the ride will lose any value in popularity before they decide to pull the plug. Nevertheless, even though I think the ride system has reached the end of its life, there is still one reason why I think Universal will keep the Simpsons ride, and it has to do with the land the theater sits on. If Universal did decide to bulldoze the Simpsons Land and the ride, I don't think they would have enough room for a new attraction. If you look at a map of Universal, you can see that they don't exactly have a lot of room to expand. Let's say Universal, they move forward with closing the area and level the land. If they took out the theater, they took out the Quickie Mart, they took out Krusty Burger, even if all of that was demolished, there still wouldn't be a lot of space. If Simpsons was located somewhere else in the park, it could be feasible, but because it's located between Men in Black, DreamWorks, and a backstage area, they're kind of limited on potential expansion. You could say if they also took out the Animal Actor Theater, then they would have a lot more space to work with, but there's still the problem of the backstage area. If they wanted to use that land, they would either have to push it back or completely relocate it, which that's pretty difficult. You don't want to mess with existing infrastructure, and it's also the same reason why I don't think they'll demolish all 3 of these major buildings. Maybe they'll get rid of 1, but all 3? That's unrealistic.
Now, the only caveat to this is I think you very well could see Animal Actors, that building being taken out. I think you could potentially even see Men in Black. You could reach all the way over there to bring that in. Let's just say they are going to do Pokemon right here. And I don't know about the backstage areas that he talks about, if those are going to perhaps potentially be relocated on some level, because we do know with Epic Universe, not all of that land is just for the theme park itself. There's a lot of space being utilized for storage, backstage stuff, administrative buildings that they are using for Epic Universe that will free up space that is currently in Universal Studios side that's near City Walk. So if some of these backstage areas are relocated, or some of these administrative areas are relocated to Epic Universe or other areas, that would free up that space. I'm not saying that is the thing that's happening, but I'm saying that could be something. So if that is the case, once Epic is done and they are able to move a lot of that stuff, which they have already moved some stuff over into some storage areas near Epic Universe. So, or if it even just allowed them to decrease the amount of backstage area back there, this is where that would open up a lot more space. And I think they could still do an attraction here, because obviously if you built one attraction here, you can build another type of attraction here. It would just probably depend on what type of thing they could do, given if they are able to go into these backstage areas. But I think that's something that I would add to this, where that could change the scenario here in terms of the space they have to work with.
Remember, constructing new buildings, creating new infrastructure is very expensive. It's way cheaper to take an existing building that's already on the land and just repurposing it, gutting it out, and then retheming it. All parks do this when they can. Think of attractions like Guardians of the Galaxy, where they took the old Universe of Energy building and just slapped on a new coat of paint and placed a starship in front of it. They didn't have to get any demolition teams, erect another structure for the queue. All they had to do was repurpose what they already had. And I think if Universal had a choice, they would do the same. And if they did choose to do that, then I would not want them to get rid of the Simpsons Land. I guarantee that if Universal gets rid of the Simpsons and keeps the original building, all they will do is change out the video you're watching. That's it.
I don't think that's the case, given the prior argument, and I agree about that, is the ride system is so old. I mean, if you did go with a similar type of ride in here, you would just use an updated ride system in here if they did go with, say, some sort of, simulator type of experience here. And really, in my mind, I think The Simpsons, like he had earlier said, they were far more popular years ago, and I think you're just going to continue to see this slow decline. And to me, I would much rather take something that is on the down and out, and plus your biggest competitor owns it. And if you really think about, if you're not going to renew the contract anyways because of, who, I'm guessing Disney's going to want even more money for it. It's on a decline in terms of popularity. It doesn't make any sense to renew that contract just to keep this in here. And really, to me, the Simpsons Land has not been, I know some people, obviously it's a draw for some people, but I think overall, you put Pokemon in here, which is a big rumor. I think that would instantaneously become a pretty major draw, especially for kids and even some adults, even my age, that love Pokemon. So I think for that reason, you could potentially maintain this building, just use a different ride system if they were limited on the space that they have to work with.
I do not want that. I don't want any more simulators. So it's either they commit and remove everything, or they keep The Simpsons the way it is. I know that eventually, as time goes on, when Universal is building more and more extravagant theme park lands, the Simpsons area is going to look a lot more outdated by comparison.
And that's another reason, too, as things continue to develop, that area is just going to stick out even more in terms of the ride.
But unless Universal is willing to make a worthy replacement, this should not be removed. It's gotta be like when they took out Jaws, but replaced it with Diagon Alley. Make the new addition a massive step up from its predecessor. But even if Universal decides to keep The Simpsons for at least another 10 years, I'm okay with that. I enjoy all the Simpsons references. And The Simpsons is something only Universal can do right. You'd think if Disney had the opportunity to build a Simpsons Land, it would be good. Think again.
Oh, this place sure has changed since Disney bought the rights to Cosmic Wars. Aw,
Purchased for $4 billion I was, yet still hoodie ragged where I do this.
All right, well, I mean, when it comes to, the things he's talking about there, I agree with a lot of stuff he said. I think he brings up some very good points. I think the things, at least in my mind, I'm looking at this, I suppose, there are some pros in terms of keeping it, in terms of what would replace it. Now, I think with the rumors out there being Pokemon replacing this area, I think Pokemon is so much more of a, I guess you could say, an active IP and such a potential bigger draw than The Simpsons is, especially when you think about Nintendo already being part of the Universal Parks. Pokemon has its audience. Now, it's not something I'm very familiar with. I never played it as a kid, but I do have friends that have played it, and I know a lot of people that I've talked to, this, talking about the rumors of this going in here. I think you would have a lot of adults and kids wanting to come over here and check this out, as it is still a very relevant IP, even after as long as it's been around. And I think that probably lends to, again, Universal not owning the rights here, Disney owning them is probably the biggest 1-2 punch with this whole land. And not to mention, like I said, the diminishing, the factor that it's been fading off. It's not really a super relevant show nowadays. And I think Universal could spend the money to develop this land into, again, if they do Pokemon, I think they would get a pretty big return on that investment. Plus, I think this is something that, yet again, would be another feather in their cap in terms of competing with Disney, because they start offering more of these things with the Nintendo properties, which is reaching into kind of a nostalgia that Disney has always been able to reach into, that Universal, they've had in pockets. Back to the Future, Jaws, like they have nostalgia that they use like for their parades and things. But in terms of these lands, Super Nintendo World, that's my childhood. I am insanely looking forward to Super Nintendo World. There's a lot of people that feel the same way about Pokemon as they would with like a Zelda land going in also. So I think it would be a good exchange on their part. And again, if they are able to take some of these backstage areas or administrative areas and that gets moved over to Epic Universe, that would free up a lot more space in this area. You could also take out the Animal Actors show. You could even reach into the Men in Black ride, because that one is also getting old. But at the same time, you could probably replace that with an updated shooting system and retheme that to some other property, as Men in Black is not really a relevant one either anymore. So in a very short amount of time, this backside here of Universal Studios could look very different with some updated attractions and different IPs back here. But all in all, I think it's a solid video. He brings up some very good points. So again, go check it out. It's over at Great American Coasters. I will put a link into it in the description if you'd like to go watch it. Check it out. Subscribe to their channel and all that good stuff there. But either way, that is going to be it though for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel, as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, do you think Universal will get rid of the Simpsons area, or do you think they will keep it going into the future? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.